Well, let's also dive deeper into this crypto regulation debate. We're joined by Denelle Dixon, Stellar Development Foundation CEO. Good to have you on the show. So I want to get some of your takeaways to some of the sound that we're getting out of this hearing so far.
Yeah, the hearing I think has been really interesting. I think the Chairwoman Stabenow started the hearing by sort of laying the foundation of what they had initially brought forward with the bill, and as well as the ranking member bringing his perspective in. I mean, we were sitting there in September with Chairman Benham on these issues. We support this type of legislation, particularly filling in this gap. And, we definitely want to see some improvements to it in terms of one of the issues that you just raised around definition of security versus commodity, and making sure that the regulation is clear around that. But all in all, when there are gaps, we need to fill them.
Let me ask you the same question, Denelle, that we heard the CFTC chairman ask, which is, if in fact FTX, and we're talking about FTX International, was registered under the CFTC, whether this type of collapse would have happened, whether they would have been allowed to commingle funds with Alameda as is alleged. What do you think?
I mean, the thing that's very frustrating about this is that most of what happened here is just all about really poor management and hubris. It's about the notion that these tried and true controls that we put internally at companies, because we know that they work, just were flouted, they were disregarded. I'm hopeful that regulation and the type of regulation that we're talking about here would have caught that, but it's hard to know. Because, first of all, we don't know all the ins and outs of it yet. We've only seen what we can see from the bankruptcy filings, and also what we've heard Sam say himself publicly. But I think that what's most important here is none of this is a commentary on crypto or blockchain. It really was just about the fact that some people thought that they knew how to do this better, and they could disregard everything that we've known for years and years and years about what works internally for companies to be able to protect customer assets. So I think that's really the most important takeaway here.
But what does this damage to trust actually do for the industry? We did see a lot of people sort of pulling money out of exchanges, going to hard wallets instead, because they were sort of waiting for the dust to settle to really find out which exchanges they could trust. So I wanted to get your take, because SBF called this a risk management problem that got out of hand. Would you agree with that?
Oh, it was absolutely a risk management problem. Internal controls, there's so many issues that we're seeing right now that we know, and I'm a CEO of a company, and I think one of the things I said yesterday in a tweet was that this wasn't a high school bake sale. We needed to actually maintain these controls and put this in perspective. When you get the trust of consumers and you're holding their money in custody, you need to be able to maintain that trust through tried and true controls internally, and risk management, and having governance, proper governance, all of these things. But what you just pointed out is that there is harm to the industry, even though this wasn't about anything with respect to blockchain, the technology, or crypto. The harm to the industry is the fact that this blew up and many, many consumers are harmed as a result of it. And so that is going to take us a few steps back from a public policy perspective, and frankly, from just the communications perspective. But, we're here to make this better, and we're here to have these conversations. And I love that you're digging into this, because it's really important.
Denelle, you yourself have testified on the Hill on these hearings before. And, the argument in hindsight, since we have seen what happened with FTX, is that Sam Bankman-Fried did have a very close relationship with a lot of these lawmakers. The CFTC themselves said they met over the last 14 months 10 times with SBF. To discuss the regulatory issue. I think his words were that he was really, sort of going at it hard with CFTC. And I wonder if, when you think about the legislation that has been introduced around how to regulate this space, to what extent that is now tainted because of the oversized influence that SBF had on Capitol Hill. Denelle, can you hear us okay?
I now can. Sorry, I lost you for a second. I think I understand, the notion that your question about knowing that these meetings happen, and to what extent has that actually benefited or harmed the legislation. The legislation that was put together by Chairwoman Stabenow and Ranking Member Bozeman, in addition to co-authors on that legislation, was done so from a principled base. It was looking at their experience with the CFTC and understanding the benefits of the CFTC and what they could do if properly funded to be able to take over this spot regulation for the spot market. And that, importantly, is not something that Sam Bankman-Fried made up. And that is, importantly, not something that FTX influenced in terms of that creation of the notion that there's a gap there. So I think that to the extent that there was a lot of influence by FTX and Sam himself, it doesn't actually tarnish this legislation. The fact is there's a gap, and we need to fill that gap. I would love to see the gap filled with definitions around what is a security in this space and what is what remains a commodity, understanding the balance between the SEC and the CFTC. These are things that need to happen because it actually creates regulatory clarity for the industry as a whole. And it actually allows consumers to feel much more protected. So these are all really important, despite the influence of maybe some players that didn't have their hearts and minds in the right place when they went to make these things happen.
Denelle Dixon, appreciate you joining us today to get your insights. Stellar Development Foundation CEO.